Greetings, adventure travelers and fellow keepers of the lake. How are you all doing? Welcome back. This is gonna be the first video in the GM guide part of the series. We're gonna be tackling some questions that people had with the previous volume and how those questions have been answered in the volume 2. So basically the questions that we had were tied to going from attrition to HP and back and how the conversion works. There are also questions about how do saves work, are there any saves? And of course, loot. I think loot has been partially explained because the question was, if I find an enemy down, and can I take their weapons and use them as sort of like HP? And I've always said to GMs that watched my previous videos that yes, you can, but you need to be aware that that's a type of healing. But in the second volume, we got the salvage. A salvage gives you the ability to gain a little bit of points from the downed enemy. So it still feels like you have gotten something from looting the body. Let's talk about attrition first. And the first thing that is proposed in the new volume is that for those that don't want to go and explore different types of attrition, or maybe you're in the heat of the battle and you want to reduce the amount of different attrition types to juggle, so you have basic attrition, flash attrition, equipment attrition, destroy attrition, well, you can just reduce all of those to basic attrition and then just say how many of skills or equipment should be crossed. So you can go 1d4, 1d6 for variable amounts of damage and difficulty. Other than that, you can also now convert attrition to HP and back. And I understand, you might see this and say, well, that is not granular enough, but it's kind of all you need when you're converting from attrition to HP damage. You can just say, is it a heavy amount of damage or a light amount of damage? And just assign dice to that. You can then use this as a guideline to add your own levels. So maybe something that is in between light and heavy could be a D8 or a D10. Maybe something below can be D4. This is not in the book. This is something that I concluded, but why not? It's not like it's gonna break anything. This book is not about balance. It is about how the world reacts. If the GM at any point says, okay, this is D12 damage, it becomes the truth of the world, and it doesn't need to be balanced or argued upon. It just is. So this gets the job done. That's all for attrition. Now we can talk about saves. If you're familiar with D&D, Pathfinder, any of those games, you probably know what saving throws are. Well, they're basically reactive rolls that are usually initiated by the player in form of a question. If they are approved, the desired roll is made to avoid the stated threat. That is the definition from this wonderful book. Now let's explain that a bit. So I've written here saves versus truth, and this is where creative players will deploy the mechanic to their best effort outside of combat. So the GM might describe the situation like this. A bunch of guards are patrolling around as they see the characters, and eager to bring these criminals to justice, they start running and shouting. But then one player intervenes saying, hold it right there, I want to use my streetwise skill and duck into a confusing alley, pulling the friends into the hiding place. Now the guards go past them yelling and not seeing them. Now let's look at a different scenario. Maybe we have an evil wizard that is in a conflict with the players, and the evil wizard might use one of its tactics to conjure a sphere that will make it invisible. Now one of the players can intervene and say, I roll my tracking skill, and even though this sphere disappears and the enemy becomes invisible, the character still might be able to sniff out the enemy and still attack. And when it comes to the environmental saves, well, it's basically just rocks fall, everyone dies, ducking out of the way. Yeah, that's environmental saves. But now, as our brave adventurers are fighting this caster from a far-off world, some interesting technology from the Starfarer has come to the North Holds. And considering this technology, few things are more frightening than energy weapons. It is an extreme form of damage generated by high concentrations of energy in the bolts, beams, and melee weapons. When it comes to energy weapons, the damage inflicted is deadly. So 1d for equipment is destroyed and 1d for skills are disabled if you're hit with an energy weapon. It gets even worse. This weapon can insta-kill a character, and that happens if a character is hit with more than one hit in the same phase. Then they either roll their survival skill or a flat 6 on a 1d6, and if the character fails that... It goes without saying that if you fail this roll, you have just lost the character. If you succeed, you're not dead yet. Still, you need to mark off all the skills and equipment, but if by any chance you roll a 6 or an equal number to your survival skill, well, then your character just loses an arm. I am aware that these energy weapons seem very powerful, but there are possible defenses. One of those is to use evade or parry. We mentioned parry in the previous video, so you basically roll it as your defense roll and you can deflect or reflect one attack. But this only works if you have melee energy weapons that you can parry with. You can't parry energy weapons with your regular shields or swords. But for those wielding these types of weapons, not everything is so easy. These weapons are very hazardous, and if by any chance those wielding them roll minimum damage for these weapons, they damage themselves. Okay, we're moving away from energy stuff and these mechanics and things. Let's talk about more useful things that the GM can employ. Now, you would agree that when you have a scenario like this, it is pretty easy to come up with an encounter, maybe level some things and have, I don't know, stuff happen here. But if you're starting from a blank page, well, that can be pretty daunting. So what the new volume of Crown and Skull gives us is battlefields. It is basically a D12 table that defines how your battlefield looks before it starts. Some examples would be a leveled battlefield where the battlefield itself is not a factor in the odds. Another option is to roll for d6 pillars and then just add them to the battlefield. If this number is higher, you add even more pillars. Now you have a battlefield. And even with just the pillars, now you have something to provide cover to the characters or the enemies, be it from the guards on the other side or the dragon. Another example could be what is called high and low, where the battlefield is divided into the high ground and the low ground with a distinct and difficult rift in between. Maybe we can do a bridge. Why not? We know that this is unstable. You have a battlefield that might be very interesting. And now this situation, if you put a wizard here and a player here, is very different than if you swap their places. So think about this. So even though this battlefield is already interesting as it is set up like this, we got another D12 table that gives us information about how this can escalate. I won't spoil anything for you with the examples, but I can tell you that some of the tables have draconic events and modifications. Maybe a dragon is skeletal. I know this is a spider, but bear with me here. Maybe a dragon will fly into the clouds and then its next attack has no defense and it will be a surprise from a new angle. If the players are indoors, the dragon will break through the roof to execute this maneuver. And I think that will be it for this one. Look how lovely the chaos looks. I love making these videos. I'm half crouching because this table is up to my knees and I'm in a lot of pain. But I hope you enjoyed this one. And yeah, I hope you're gonna be back for the next one. The next one is gonna be about dragons and fighting dragons, designing dragon encounters, all that stuff. So I hope to see you there. But until then, I bid you
farewell, keepers.